Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel 9th house, where we talk about astrology. And as promised, we're going to talk about the natal Pluto positions as promised. And very important, this is not a transit video. If you're interested in your Pluto transits, please check out my other videos that I did recently, because transits and natal positions are quite different. With a natal position, we have more time to figure out the quality of the planet. And with a transit, there's just a limited amount of time to work with that energy. I hope that makes sense. So again, this is not a transit video. Then the other thing here is I may switch during this video from a psychological perspective to a more predictive perspective. And the reason for that is because the nature of astrology, and especially Pluto, the stars represent parts of our psyche, when we look at it this way. And therefore, we're going to have a certain behavior, a certain character, a certain personality. And certain personalities, give a certain outcome. Another very important thing is that each Pluto generation is different. Meaning that the Pluto, if you have Pluto in Libra in the first house, for example, and another person has Pluto in Scorpio in the first house, as an example, it gives a different outcome. The theme may be the same, but the quality may be different. And that is because of the quality of the sign. I've seen placements where people have Pluto in the first house, but in different signs. And therefore, the life was different. The themes were the same, but the outcome was a little bit different. So, and this is very important to understand. You are very welcome to leave your experience in the comment section for the community, but just know that I am not able to do a free reading for everyone in the comment section. That would be unfair for the people who pay for readings, and I just don't have the time, I'm sorry, but I may get back to some of you, okay? Oh, another very important thing, if you're new to this channel and you're wondering what this all is about, you don't know anything about Pluto, very important, Pluto represents in our chart the evolutionary point, meaning that Pluto shows us why we came back to this life, into this incarnation, why we chose a certain theme, so we can grow as a soul, what we need as a soul to, to get to the next level, really. And in a nutshell, Pluto represents the evolution of the soul. Pluto is also the underworld. Think of the Greek god Hades. Pluto represents riches and power. Pluto represents, it's the higher octave of Mars, and Mars is the planet of taking action and our passion. So Pluto is uber passionate and very obsessive. Okay, Pluto shows us in our natal chart where we may also be a little bit obsessed. And then again, it governs our deep psychology. So these are just a few things that Pluto rules over. For the sake of not talking too long, I'm stop now here, and I'm going to start with the natal placements, right? So see you at your natal placement. So with Pluto in the first house, without the first house, there are no other houses. This is one thing I need to mention here. The first house is a little bit like the sun, because without the sun and without the first house, there is no other house. There is no reason why we're here, right? Because of the sun and the first house really represent you. So therefore, the first house is also seen as the course of our life. Now, when we have Pluto here, this can indicate sometimes, and it really depends on the sign Pluto is in, if it makes aspects or not, but oftentimes we can talk about a plutonic life. Because as I just said, the first house is the course of our life. So when we have Pluto here, it means a plutonic life. Now, what is a plutonic life? You may ask, well, plutonic life is when we have over and over themes of obsession, mystery, even sometimes abuse, addiction, power issues, power struggles, also criminals in our life. And the way Pluto gets activated is through the 7th house. Now you may ask, why is that? Aren't we talking about here the 1st house? Well, yeah, that's true. But you need to understand, every time we have such a profound planet like Pluto or even Saturn, the opposite house also gets activated. And in that case, it is the 7th house. So the 7th house is the house of the other people. So the one that is plutonic is, of course, you, because you have it in your 1st house. And this is, and therefore you're going to attract, it's a little bit like the law of attraction, or not a little bit, it is the law of attraction, right? It's like you have a certain quality in yourself, and therefore you attract it. So what may end up happening, and the tricky thing with Pluto is we may not even be aware of it, is that as a result, because we have this plutonic energy so heavily in our chart, because it is the 1st house, we may end up attracting plutonic people into our lives. It is a little bit similar, like having Pluto in the 7th house, even though Pluto in the 7th house is rules over relationships. Here with the 1st house, it is really more about that you, throughout your life, you attract plutonic individuals into your life, because you are quite plutonic yourself. And that is the karma here. So, we may be, as a result of that, very mesmerizing, very intense, because Pluto is definitely intense. Again, even let's just say, and I don't like to say that because I don't like to hurt people's feelings, but let's just say that you don't really see yourself as an attractive individual, right? With Pluto here, you're still very attractive because you have this allure. There is something very secretive and very magnetic about you that draws people in. And therefore, we attract those people that are going to be obsessed with us, because Pluto rules over obsession. So the evolution, the reason why you came back, or how you're going to be purified in this life is through traumatic events. And this can include, again, abuse sometimes, and addiction. Like, for example, if Pluto is in Virgo, I've seen many times that people, unfortunately, because Virgo is the axis of Virgo Pisces, and it governs over medicine and, drugs, Pisces, Virgo, health and medicine. What I've seen many times is that people may end up as, being, as addicts. For example, Kurt Cobain had that in his chart. He had Pluto in the 1st house in Virgo. Lane Staley from Alice in Chains, one of the singers that I love, the one I love Lane. He had Pluto in the 1st house. And, both of them unfortunately died because of their addiction. So you see how this plays out. So it is very important here that we learn throughout our life to handle this intense energy. And the high octave of Pluto here really is to understand psychology and ourselves better. And this is the best way we can harness this Pluto energy. And actually, I would argue that this is the reason why you're here, actually, with Pluto in the 1st house, because you want to understand yourself better. Because again, the 1st house is you. So you are here because you want to understand yourself better through these traumatic events in your life. Unfortunately, I've seen that some people, when they were young with displacement, like when they were children, they had like very severe traumatic events that had to do with life and death situations. Someone, for example, that I know, they had like a very poisonous snake lingering all of a sudden around, and the snake was about to really bite them, when they were a kid. And again, the snake, which is really interesting because Pluto also can be seen as the snake energy, which is really weird. So, alone this event in our childhood, an event like this can have a very profound effect on our psyche later on as adults. We may go through life that we have to demonstrate, therefore, our own power, because Pluto represents power. And we feel like we have to demonstrate that. We have to show up, we have to stand up. So again, it is a very powerful placement to have Pluto in, because we exude power. We just are a little bit like Pluto. It is not exactly like having Pluto in the 8th house, because Pluto in the 8th house also talks about being a very influential and powerful person. But I found Pluto in the 8th house being very plutonic, because Pluto is in its home placement, right? And also very, very psychological, very complex psychological when it is in the 8th house. With the 1st house, it's really more about that we draw in these experiences, these traumatic events and people in order to understand ourselves better. What I also seen and witnessed is that a lot of people in their early years, like in their teenage years, with Pluto in the 1st house, they may, let's just say they were not awake to say it like that, to explain like that, like in a way that they were like very shallow people. And then, because we attract with Pluto in the 1st house more and more of these traumatic events, we become a profound person, with having Pluto in the 1st house. But again, we are very secretive when we have Pluto in the 1st house. We don't like to share our deepest parts with everyone. We are very guarded. And again, this is like you have this. It is because we have the survival mechanism. And this is what I wanted to say the whole time. I was looking for that word, man. Survival mechanism, very big when we have Pluto in the 1st house. As I just gave that example with the little girl and the snake, who had Pluto in the 1st house. Therefore, we have the survival mechanism, and we go through life with the survival mechanism. I've seen many times that people, even if they are sick, they go to work, they show up and work, they're like, no, I have to do this, And again, it is all about demonstrating our power also, when we have Pluto in the 1st house. So again, as I just gave the example with those very famous singers, we really have what it takes to become a very influential and very powerful person in this lifetime. But it really depends also if Pluto makes any aspects, and also if there is a Mars involved, because then it can get very nasty, it can get uber abusive and manipulative. And so, for you, it's very important to really to see through these patterns that you attract over and over again, those kind of people, those plutonic people, so that you stop to draw them in, right? Because I know that many people with the Pluto in the 1st house, they are a little bit fed up of having, these people in their lives. But once you really understand that, you are the one a little bit that draws them in. We can take responsibility for it, and we, our life becomes a little bit more easier. And again, if we also recognize that Pluto here is a wonderful tool to understand ourselves better, it is the first step into healing. Another thing, also what I've seen with this is that we really change tremendously when it comes to our appearance throughout our life. Because, I know that in Vedic astrology, for example, they talk about the second house being the face. But for me personally, it is the first house. It's always going to stay the first house. For me, when I see a rising sign, or when I see someone, I can guess their rising sign oftentimes because of the, how they look, how they represent themselves, right? So with Pluto here, we may change our looks dramatically. So it is a placement of being the ugly duck sometimes, in the formative years, but then, transforming into a very beautiful swan and into a very captivating and beautiful and magnetic persona and individual. Another thing here is, of course, if you are interested in those things, it is an excellent position if you want to be an occultist. If you are into magic, into spirituality, it is an excellent placement for that one. So this is Pluto in the first house. So Pluto in the second house. Now, there are some astrologers that love to say that this is a bad placement. And I'm here to tell you that I see it a little bit from a different perspective, because there are always good and bad sides to astrology and to life in general. Life is not just purely bad or purely good. We have duality in this life and in this dimension where we live in. So the second house governs over self-value, our possessions, our money. So the polarity point for you is the 8th house, of course, because that is the opposite house of the second house. And the 8th house governs over personal power, having power over people, the money from other people, from our partner. So one thing that I witnessed with having Pluto in the second house, is that there are two possibilities here. We are either born into a not so good financial situated family, or we are born into wealth. These are two things that I've seen with this placement. And then another thing, of course, is because there is something to the second house that can be sometimes a little bit like guarded and stingy. And with Pluto being here, we can be very guarded and we can be very stingy with our talents. It's like, let's just say with you have like something to offer to the world, or your money, With Pluto here, we don't want to share. We want to keep everything to ourselves. Because we have this fear of losing our power, the 8th house. So, with the second house in general, like with the second, the third, the 5th and 6th and so on and so forth, it's not such a dramatic placements like with Pluto on the angles. With you, it's very important that you understand that money is not everything in life. Yes, we need money, and yes, money gives us freedom. And this could be a theme of your life, even, that you want to have financial freedom, but, we have to be careful here that we don't sacrifice our ethics, our morality, just in order to get that money. Because it's very easy with Pluto in the second house to overcross these boundaries, and to really do questionable things in order to get to that money. It can be seen sometimes, in charts of people that are pimps, unfortunately, or, people that do these kinds of services, in order to gain money. Because again, the polarity point is the 8th house, and the 8th house, is a very scorpionic house, right? So again, watch out for any tendencies to not become too obsessed and too attached when it comes to money, because it can have a very negative karmic outcome on your soul. People who have that, if I'm not mistaken, Bill Gates has that, and he has a lot of karma already in his, in his life, and as I said, it's very important that we get purified through Pluto and not that we don't get like a prisoner of our own obsession, because this is not what we want. We want to get free of our, addictive behaviors. So again, watch out for any tendencies of becoming too rigid, becoming too stingy, becoming too, I have to demonstrate my power at all costs now. Or watch out definitely for, keeping your talents somehow only for yourself. And again, of course, the second house is security. Security is a very, very important thing to us when we have Pluto in the second house, because as I just said, we are either born with it or not. But, either way, I have to tell one thing. Either if you are born with that money or not, you're going to long for more security, because again, Pluto is that a planet that wants to get more, that is obsessed and addicted. So you have to understand that sometimes security is an illusion. We may think that something is safe. Guess what? It can't. You don't know what is going to be next week or tomorrow with your money. Do we know that really? I mean, honestly, I'm asking you, do you know if the next week or the next month, the governments or the politicians or whatever, they're going to decide to change the money system, the financial system? You don't know that, and then all of a sudden the security is vanished, it's gone. So I need you to understand that security is not everything in life, and it is an illusion. Also, it is important to understand for you that you don't have to do everything for money. So watch out for not becoming too attached to your possessions and belongings, because it is just an illusion. And, you're not going to take them with you when you die. You're not going to take your car or your gold with you when you die. We don't take those things with us. These are just items here in this incarnation, and once we pass on, they don't exist over there, right? So this is Pluto in the second house. So Pluto in the third house is more of a light placement to have Pluto in. As I just said, like for Pluto in the second house, the second, third, 6th, 9th, 11th, 12th house are not such dramatic houses to have Pluto in. So therefore, it is a very more of a light placement. So what is the third house? Well, the third house governs over our communication, our mental ability, the way we interact with the world, with our surroundings, our voice, our language, and the way we learn. Learning is a big thing with the third house because it is a Mercury house. When we have Pluto in here, we want to acquire a lot of knowledge. Oftentimes what I've seen as an effect here is that we can see individuals that like to learn a lot about esoteric things because of Pluto, because Pluto governs over esoterica and the occult. So a lot of times you will see people that like to read a lot about, a lot of books about spirituality and esoterica. But in general, it gives a quality that, again, someone that is very knowledgeable. Because again, Pluto likes to blow things up. and give a lot, a little bit like Jupiter, but in a more negative way. Because again, as I said, it's the way how we communicate. We can be very persuasive with Pluto here. We have like a certain ability on how to talk to others. We may have a good voice. And again, there's a quality in our tone where we can win people over. So this is also another placement of people that are very good detecting a liar. Like, for example, in the mainstream media, when we hear one lie after the other, those kind of people that no, this is a lie what they're saying, or this is a lie what they are writing, So we have individuals that are very good finding out the truth, from things, from a matter. Now, in a very negative way, and especially when we have Neptune here as well, or when we have any Neptune contact, sometimes we can see someone that is a little bit too much into conspiracy theories. And we have to be careful with that. Now, I myself, I enjoy some conspiracy theories, I have to say, but sometimes we have to be careful, and distinct what is true and what is false, we can get very obsessed here again, with knowledge and with the hidden truth, the hidden meaning of things, of life and everything. And we may be prone to reading too much into something, but not always, I just want to point it out that it can be a possibility with this placement. But yeah, as I said, it's not a traumatic placement to have Pluto in. So the way we get our evolution in this lifetime, right? This is what this video is about, after all, is through gaining knowledge, through reading, through, really going deep into esoterica, occult stuff. This is how we really get to the next level as a soul. Because the ninth house is the polarity point. It's the opposite from the third house. And the ninth house is the house of, of philosophy, those broader, horizons, and also spirituality. It's also the house of God, the man-made God and spirituality. So again, with Pluto in the third house, our evolutional point is to gain so much access to information and literature, so we really can learn and grow as a soul and get to the next level through that information. So that is Pluto in the third house. So Pluto in the fourth house. Pluto in the fourth house is something that I'm very familiar with because I have Pluto on my IC. So I know how this energy works very well. And as I said in the beginning of this video, Pluto on the angles, or in the first, fourth, seventh, and 10th house, are, in my opinion, the most traumatic houses to have Pluto in. It gives the most effects I found, including the 8th house where Pluto is in its domicile, but still, it is quite traumatic in those angles. So what is the fourth house? Well, the fourth house governs over our home, our ancestry, our mom, maternal figures in the family. It's our deepest part, of the chart. So again, our family and home life. So with Pluto here, there are multiple things that can be seen, really. And I'm going to try my best to name them all. And again, it doesn't have to be traumatic. It depends on your chart. I'm going to say this over and over again in this video. It depends on, if your Pluto makes aspects or not, and you most likely are going to know that, right? Because you know your life. So with Pluto here, there could be abuse in the family, first of all, because and it's most traumatic, and its most traumatic effect, Pluto may, give abuse in the early childhood. We may feel like our home or our family is not really stable. A little bit like with Uranus, but in a more traumatic effect, like that we can't trust our family. We may feel big time. We may feel very smothered, and we may feel very controlled by our moms when we have Pluto in our 4th house. And we also may feel very controlled by other maternal figures in the family. If you say you don't have a mom or you didn't have a mom, let's just say your grandma, was there and did the parenting. So perhaps your grandma was in that position, right? And then, it was your grandma that controlled you. So again, we have this issue with being controlled by the mom. And what I've seen as an effect on our psyche is that we want to break free at all costs from this family. And for some of you who are watching this and you don't have this placement, but you're watching this because you want to understand the placements more, you have to think of the Pluto in the 4th house. And I know it's going to sound a little bit, I don't want to discriminate anyone, but, think of the families that are heavily into Islamic traditions, where the women in the family don't have much to say. This is the kind of control we may experience when we have Pluto in our 4th house. Another thing I forgot to mention, very important, is that our mom may be a little bit woo-woo. The mom may be mentally ill, okay, as an effect of having Pluto in our 4th house. And therefore, we're going to feel even more that we are tied to our mom and to our home, even though we don't like that, because we want our freedom, right? We want to have our place in the world, the 10th house, because the 10th house is our place in the world. Another thing with Pluto in the 4th house is that we may feel ashamed of where we come from. Some of us may have what I just talked about, that perhaps the mom is mentally ill, or some of us experienced abuse in the family life. One thing I have to say here is when it comes to this abuse, this doesn't mean that it had to be you. It also can mean that you witnessed that someone in the family, got abused by another family member. And again, therefore, we may be very ashamed of who we are. So as a compensation for that, we are prone to reaching and longing for these 10th house things, because this is the polarity point, the 10th house, right? As I just said. So we may be very obsessed of making it in the world, of having a career, of having a good status, because we want to conceal at all costs our family and our background. We don't want people to see who we, where we came from. Now, if this is you, if you have this shameful feelings about yourself, first of all, you need to learn that, going after material things or status is not going to help. It's just a band-aid, but it's not going to really get rid of these feelings. So you have to practice a lot of self-love with this Pluto placements. Self-love really is key for Pluto in the 4th house. Big time. Big time. We may need it a little bit more than the others in this lifetime. And it's nothing to be ashamed of, If you need more time for yourself, take it, really, because that's how you're going to heal. I have Pluto in the 4th house, and I'm going to be honest, I took a lot of, I had just for a Leo rising, I had Pluto transiting my 6th house. So I was very lucky in hindsight that I got to spend a lot of time in isolation, 12th house, to heal my Pluto in the 4th house issues, to be quite honest, So, again, healing and going into therapy may be also a very good thing for you. Or the opposite also can be true, right? That we may feel very proud of where we come from, because not, as I said, not everyone is going to have massive abuse or massive childhood trauma in their lives. Sometimes it's just a little thing. Sometimes Pluto also may only show in the fourth house that we come from a family that just wants to control us. For example, those rich families, those very wealthy families that control where who the kids stayed and with who they are. Like those type of families. Perhaps you come from this type of family, so it's not so traumatic like for the others. Another thing that comes to my mind, and this is where we have to pay attention. I found that if we made this experience in our childhood, that we are in a way too smothered or too controlled, we end up attracting those kind of partnerships into our life. And I know it's not the seventh house, but you need to understand that, Pluto works, we are talking about here formative years, right? And when we look at it from a psychological perspective, this is most likely what's going to happen, that we repeat the pattern all over again, until we, break free from it. But sometimes, and this is how astrology works, we also can see that this is a reoccurring theme if we want it or not, unfortunately. Astrology can go both ways. This is the bizarre thing, Sometimes we can break free from it, and sometimes it shows us a prediction, that someone that we are going to be in those kind of relationships, So watch out for those tendencies, for those partners that want to have you only for themselves, again smothering. And so yeah, this is Pluto in the fourth house. So Pluto in the fifth house, this is a very nice placement for Pluto to be in. And I'm very, very jealous of anyone who has that, to be quite honest, because it's a very creative and self-expressing placement. The fifth house is the house of Leo, naturally. And it governs over having a lot of fun because, Leo is all about leisure and having fun. So what I've seen many times with this placement is that we are dealing with individuals that are highly creative, because Pluto likes to give a lot of things, like a little bit like Jupiter, but with a more negative undertone. So the evolutional point here is, why we are here, why we came back, is that we want to, our soul wants to express itself creatively, ultimately. Unfortunately, I've seen cases where people have displacement in their chart, Pluto in the fifth house, but what ended up happening is that they initially wanted to do something creative with their life, but somehow they got off the road and they lost themselves completely in the fun, And when I say fun, I mean that they became addicts because, this is another thing of the fifth house. The fifth house also is the house of having a lot of fun. It deals with, going to the nightclub and all these things, meeting our friends and hanging out and drinking the booze and doing drugs. This can be the negative downside to the fifth house. Many times people don't talk about this, but this is what also the fifth house governs over. So and especially when Pluto is in here, because Pluto talks about the underworld and the negative sides of our personality. So again, I've seen many times when people were not able to harness that creative power in a positive way, that unfortunately this negative side kicked in. So we really have to be careful here that we don't lose ourselves too much in the fun. again, I've seen it over and over again, that people went, and also because the fifth house governs over romance, very important. It's the house of, dating, having multiple lovers. So this also can show that we have during our lifetime a lot of romantic interests. And that we learn from these experiences, that this is the way our soul wants to get to the next level, through these romantic, experiences sometimes, and they may be quite traumatic because of Pluto, because Pluto gives a lot of trauma. It gives that flavor of trauma, and especially in the fifth house. So another thing, of course, is because the fifth house also governs over children, is that something very... that we have, and this is something that I've seen, and interestingly enough, there's one person that I know that had all of these things that I'm just talking about because they have Pluto in the fifth house. They have a lot of creative talent, but could not harness that in a positive way. So they became a little bit like addicts. And then they became pregnant with a child that requires a special care, because this child is a little bit handicapped, if I'm not mistaken. So you see how this plays out. So again, the fifth house also governs over children, so there may be that we are tied because of Pluto to our children, as I just explained, but most likely it's not something that we see as negative. Well, at least that's my observation with this placement. It's not something that we see as negative. We may enjoy being very tied to our kids when we have Pluto in the fifth house. So yeah, it's not such a, it's not uber dramatic like on the angles. It is a very good position for Pluto to be in, but you have always to remember that you have creative talents that are worthy to be shared and to be seen. And if you don't, if you don't give it room, if you don't give these creative impulses room, it may be channeled into something more negative, like drinking, taking drugs. So it's very important for you to be creative, to give room to your creativity. There are many forms of how to be creative. You don't have to be a singer, you don't have to be an actor. Creativity has many facets, There's so many ways on how we can be creative in our lives, or how we can have a creative ability. So this is Pluto in the fifth house. So Pluto in the sixth house. The sixth house governs over our daily routine, our habits, diet, and job. The 10th house is our career, and the 6th house is our job. So, and how we work, the employees. So with Pluto here, this is not such a traumatic placement to have Pluto in, to be quite honest, but it may indicate that we get our evolution as a soul through a particular job that we do. It may be that we are born to be a certain, to work in a specific field that has to do with service. Okay, and these are things like, there are many ways on how to serve and have a job. It's not just being a bartender. It's or working as a nurse, even though that may be true for some of you, that Pluto in the sixth house, shows someone that could be a nurse. However, again, there may be something with a job that really gives you the. And the sixth house, of course, is also the health, and this is why I mentioned nurse, to be a nurse. With Pluto here, we may be very interested in medicine and the healthcare. This sometimes can show a placement of someone that is destined to work in those kind of things, to be a doctor, to work in alternative medicine even. We with Pluto in the 6th house, we are very aware of our diet. It is something that is very crucial to us, and we want to eat well with Pluto in the 6th house. This is something that really nourishes our soul. When it comes to our work environment, again, to come back to this one, the polarity point here is the 12th house. So the 12th house governs over isolation. So which means that we may be very secretive when it comes to our work situation. Sometimes the Pluto in the 6th house really can indicate a job where we have something to do with, and don't ask me what it is, because there are many things that fall into this category, but a job that has something to do with powerful people and where we cannot give the details fully out to the public, something like that. Okay, like a secretive job that is very powerful, where you work with powerful people. And again, so this is where you get your evolution as a soul. In these kind of environments. Again, as I said, it's not the most traumatic placement for Pluto to be in. So I hope you're not disappointed with my with my reading for you for the Pluto in the 6th house, because there's not a lot to say here. Even though I have to say one thing is for sure, you really like to work. We have to be careful not to become a workaholic with Pluto in the 6th house. We may be prone on taking on too much. And as a result of that, being in isolation again, which is the 12th house. And we may be very overly perfectionist, because the 6th house is a Virgo house, So we may be so perfectionist to a point where we can get paranoia, because Pluto governs over these things, right? So watch out for this tendency. And again, something what you really can do, what is really beneficial for your soul and for the growth and evolution of your soul, is to work with alternative medicine, how to improve the diet or your diet, and workouts, exercise. So these are very good things for you on how to nourish your soul and your soul evolution. And so that is Pluto in the 6th house. So Pluto in the 7th house. This is a very, very interesting one. I have a lot to say when it comes to this placement. So first of all, what is the 7th house? Well, the 7th house is the house of relationships. It's the you and me axis. So the first house is me. The 7th house is you. So it's you and me, right? So it's the relationship. It's the house of business also and marketplace. It's the house of the law also. Because it is a Libra house. Libra governs over all these things, over relationships, being diplomatic, law. So when we have Pluto here, the theme of our life is to be in very heavily plutonic relationships. And what are plutonic relationships, you may ask? Plutonic relationships are relationships that are very traumatic, where the other person or your partner or yourself, and we're going to talk about this, are very consumed and obsessed when it comes to the relationship or to this person or you. So your partner may be very obsessed, or your partners, I should say, may be very obsessed. You may be very obsessed. And here's the interesting thing. You may ask yourself even, why do I keep on attracting those very obsessive relationships and people? This is a question that you have, right? You don't realize that this is something you actively are seeking. It's in yourself. It's something that your soul wants to experience. You need that intensity. Sometimes we're even not aware of this when we have Pluto in the 7th house, but we feed off this intensity. Also, what I've seen many times with Pluto in the 7th house is that, we want to be in a lot of relationships, even sometimes, because we learn a lot from these relationships and from these people. What I witnessed that from people that have this placement is that oftentimes somehow they take on the persona or characteristics and personality traits of the ones they were with or their friends. It's very weird. It's very, very weird. It's like they're doing something like method acting. Really. And you're not even aware of this, and it's not for everyone, but I've seen this in some cases, where people with Pluto in the 7th house, they take on the speaking style or the general or the style like of someone, and they like impersonating someone. It's really weird. That's one phenomenon that really stood out to me. But again, it's not for everyone, It really depends on your chart, and especially if you're Aquarius. If you're an Aquarius, you're most likely you're a little bit prone to do that. Let's just say it like that. Then another biggie that really stands out over and over again with this Pluto placement is that you are very lucky when it comes to business and partnerships. And what I mean by that is that somehow, even if you don't have the talent, and here's the thing, and I don't want to be mean here, really. It's not about being mean. But I've seen cases where people with Pluto in the 7th house, they don't really have the talent or what it takes, but they end up getting the deal. When we talk about artists, for example, like let's just say you're a musical artist, I've seen cases with Pluto in the 7th house where the individual they need a lot of coaching, let's just say. Really, they're not there where we could say, okay, they're ready, right? But guess what? They somehow attract someone powerful, like a major label, where they get the deal. It's very weird. It's really, really weird. But oftentimes also, because it is the 7th house, of contracts, the 7th house governs over contracts, these people may, feel a little bit too overpowered by these corporations, So yeah, it's very weird. We end up getting the deal even though we don't really have what it takes. So we are really lucky, but then we feel like, I feel overpowered, by this institution somehow. So this is a thing that I really witnessed with Pluto in the 7th house. And I really don't know why that is. So, but coming back to the relationship part, so the way our soul has its evolution in this lifetime is through other people, because the polarity point from the 7th house is the 1st house. So we get to know ourselves, the 1st house, better when we are in a very traumatic and plutonic relationship. And again, plutonic relationships are very intense relationships with a lot of obsession, passion, sex, addiction, and all of these themes. It's something we really feed off sometimes with Pluto in the 7th house. So yeah, if you ask yourself why you keep on attracting those partners, now hopefully, and share you're welcome to share your experience in the comment section. And that is Pluto in the 7th house. So Pluto in the 8th house. So this is the placement where Pluto, of course, is in its domicile, because the 8th house is the house of Scorpio and Pluto is at home in Scorpio, right? So I'm a Pluto in Scorpio generational child. and I do know this energy very well. So with Pluto in the 8th house, we have a natural affinity to psychology. This is an excellent placement for anyone who wants to become a psychologist. We are, and this is a negative trait of Pluto in the 8th house, we are very good at manipulating people. with Pluto in the 8th house. We know on how to pull the strings. You can see Pluto in the 8th house in a lot of politicians' chart, if you like it or not. And the last time someone accused me, when I had this video up, someone accused me in the comments that I just looked at it from a negative point of view. Listen, it's not my fault. Unfortunately, on this planet Earth, there are not a lot of people that rise above their negativity. You know, when you give a lot of people power, there are just a few people that are willing to do good with their power. Unfortunately, there are more people that want to misuse their power, and that's not my fault. But back again, with Pluto in the 8th house, we are very sexual. We are interested in the underworld. This is right on Hades here. This is really Hades, Pluto here. You know, this is the placement of Hades. So I happen to know people who had Pluto in the 8th house and in Scorpio, like a double whammy. And a lot of them really always gravitated towards the underworld. And when I mean the underworld, I'm talking about shady businesses, strip clubs, you know, things like that, really. So this is a theme with Pluto in the 8th house, that we are really drawn to these things. But again, you know, the positive side of it is that we may have this ability of healing other people, because we have this ability to see through them, you know, so we can detect like where someone has like an issue and help them to work through it, you know. So again, it can have its good sides, but unfortunately, I've seen cases where people misuse their powers, and again, you can look it up. A lot of politicians have that in their chart. Of course, with the 8th house, sexual relationships and Pluto here are emphasized. They are most likely to be very intense, and you may be very fascinated by sex. You know, it's something that you may even have an addiction. You know, you may be very obsessed with sex. So this really can draw in intense experiences, you know, with other people. So for you, it's like your soul needs that ecstasy, you know, that we get when we are sexually active with someone. You really feed off of that. It's something that you really crave sometimes, or oftentimes, you know, with Pluto in the 8th house. If you say, no, that's not me, but trust me, most likely there is going to be something that has to do with sex in your life, you know, or you manipulate with sex. You know, you try to manipulate others with sex. To get something out of it, you know, this is what I've seen oftentimes. So for you, the polarity point is the 2nd house, and the 2nd house is where we are self-reliant, where we have our own money, our own values. So you have to learn really that you don't have to always be with other people, have the money of other people, being sexually involved with other people. You know, it's very important for you actually to be alone and to make it on your own, you know. And this is where you could have, you know, if you master this in this lifetime, this could be really excellent for your soul. Because again, you know, with Pluto in the 8th house, we are prone to having, you know, getting the money from other people, using our manipulation tactics to gain from other people, power struggles and all these things. So again, it is important for you that you learn to be self-reliant and to, not always, that you don't have always to get something out from someone. That is something you have to learn, you know, that everything is transactional. And but again, you know, it's also a very good one for people who want to be psychologists, you know. This would be the higher octave of that placement, really. Again, excellent for people who want to help other people to heal trauma. So that is Pluto in the 8th house. So with Pluto in the ninth house, what I've seen many times, and I think someone commented the last time, but isn't that the sun in the ninth house? Like, and you have to, sometimes in astrology, guys, we have an overlap of themes. It's not just that one planet is that. Sometimes two planets can represent the same thing, but in a different light. And this is where, Pluto here comes in. So with Pluto in the ninth house, most likely what I've seen over and over again is that we are very drawn to foreign lands, and that that our soul that gets to the next level, or that our soul needs the evolution that our soul gets the evolution when we are in a foreign country. For example, my mom has that. And before someone says, that's biased because it's your mom. No, listen, I looked it up. I know many charts who have this and who ended up living somewhere else. Okay. So, but again, it's a reoccurring theme somehow that people with Pluto in the ninth house, they get transformed when they are in a foreign country, because first of all, you don't speak the language, right? The language is foreign. So you have to learn third house, and that is the polarity point, or that is where the polarity point comes in. We have to learn, actually, with Pluto in the ninth house, there is this theme that we somehow have a hard time articulating certain things, because the ninth house is this house where we get insights from God, from the universe. And, sometimes it's very difficult to put these informations that we get from a higher consciousness into language, right? It's often, for me at least it is, I have my sun in the ninth house. Sometimes it is very hard for me to put this into language. So, and this is where the third house kicks in. We have our evolution when we learn on how to articulate our higher-minded or sometimes even lofty ideas, ninth house. Again, it is seen in people's charts that live abroad, that live in a different country than their motherland. Also, of course, which is what is very big here with Pluto in the ninth house, really big. We may be someone that is very attached to our belief system. Of course, because the ninth house also governs over the man-made religion. Religion is man-made, but the man-made spirituality, I should say, like religion. So this can show a place. This can also show people that are, that become priests, something like that. And we may be very attached to our belief system, and we may feel like we have to convert others, with other beliefs. It's like this thing. You have to believe in that because it is so good. So it's like it's that kind of thing. We can get very fanatic here. With Pluto in the ninth house, we have to be very careful. The other thing here is we are very profound. We are a very deep soul when we have Pluto in the ninth house. It's a planet that gives profound insights. And then when we have it, in the ninth house, of course, the house of God, the house of, higher learning, we get a lot of those things, a lot of higher insights, a lot of deep knowledge. So it's oftentimes seen with people that have this power. So again, as I said, for you, it is very important to get your ideas in an articulate way, to write it down, to get it into language. And you also, a little bit similar like with the third house Pluto, you love to learn also. And this is how your soul really gets the next step in evolution. But as I said, it's not such a dramatic placement. You're most likely going to get your evolution in a foreign country, where you get transformed, or through travel, foreign country, and being part of a religion or political organization. So that is Pluto in the ninth house. So Pluto in the 10th house, this is a placement that I've seen many times in celebrities' charts. I know some of you are going to say, well, I'm not a celebrity. Well, I know people that are not celebrities that have Pluto in the 10th house, but I just thought it is nice to mentioning this because, the 10th house is the house of higher status, of career. And so when we have Pluto, the planet of power here, it can give someone that has a lot of power in a corporation or in a enterprise. But when we look at it from a more practical point of view, let's just say you live quote unquote a normal life. What I've seen oftentimes of displacement is that somehow, because the 10th house is also like the leader of the family, it's the father. The 4th house is the mom, the 10th house is the father. So somehow we feel very responsible for our family. And this may look like that we may feel that we have to take on the leadership position in the family, and no one really asks you, but you feel like you have to do this. It's like you have this responsibility because, again, the polarity point here is the 4th house. So this is how you are going to be transformed. So this is how your soul gets the, evolutional point. So through the 4th house, through the family. So you are seen as the leader of the family. And listen, this does not mean that you are the one who earns the most of money, because I've seen cases where someone else in the family makes a lot of money, but then the other person still, because of their personality, they lead the family. So I hope this makes sense. So again, depending on the aspects that we have in our chart, it can be a very good placement to make it big in this world. As I said, a lot of celebrities have Pluto in the 10th house. What I found is that it can also be linked to secret societies sometimes even, because, the 10th house, first of all, Pluto is a secretive planet, a planet of occult knowledge. Then with the 10th house, we have these very powerful people, because the 10th house represents people of status, So as a result of that, we could become very powerful and we really have what it takes. However, I also seen the other thing where people for a long period of time don't have a career. Because again, as I said, with Pluto, we can get both extremes, So it also can show that for a long period of time in our life, we don't have a career. But then all of a sudden we end up making it. It's very weird somehow. Really, I really witnessed it's either one way or the other, where for a long period of time, we don't have a career, and then all of a sudden, boom, we are at the top of the game somehow, And again, it really is up to your chart, what kind of planets you have. Of course, if you have Venus together in the 10th house, this is somehow a little bit difficult because Pluto and Venus is very difficult. It may show that we had a time of not having money, being a little bit like a bankrupt energy to it. So yeah, the polarity point, as I said, is the 4th house. This is where we get our evolution through the family. We may feel very compelled to take on the leadership in the family, and therefore we want to make it. We want to provide for the family. We want to be seen as someone very important from the family that made it. This is what we are here, with Pluto in the 10th house. So this is Pluto in the 10th house. So Pluto in the 11th house, this is I found a light placement and a little bit similar, like with Pluto in the 10th house when it comes to giving fame and success. And again, before someone comments, before some smarty says that I talk about it, that it like Jupiter, no, I don't. Pluto takes small things and blows them up, but we always get the negative side effect of it. With Jupiter, we don't have that. So with Pluto in the 11th house, we have this ability, because the 11th house is a house of groups and, think of Facebook groups, Instagram groups, but also our circle of people, our community. So we may be seen as a very powerful individual in our community. I've seen this many times in charts of people that have an easy time going viral on the internet. It is seen as a placement of having fame because of being famous, that sort of thing. So what I've seen oftentimes happening is that because the polarity point is the 5th house, and the 5th house is the house of creativity, that we may be involved with some sort of groups that are linked to something creative. And this is how we get our evolution as a soul, I happen to know people that because of their circle of friends, 11th house, they ended up doing creative things, 5th house. And that really changed them, that really transformed them. So it is a really good placement to have. You can have a more easier time when it comes to being successful in the world and being creative. And again, being creative is also something that really would benefit you. And sharing yourself, and for you it's very important to have friends and being loyal to your friends. Like you're most likely to have, it's like you have a relationship with your friends rather than a romantic relationship. It's somehow something that I've seen, especially if you are a Gemini. This is a tendency. So yeah, it is not a traumatic placement. There's nothing really negative to say here. The only negative side that I see with Pluto in the 11th house is when we talk about your own voice in the group, that you somehow feel like perhaps you are overlooked, that there are power struggles in that group, that you are with. But this is really the only negativity that I see. Or, that you attract negative people, Pluto, in some sort of group situation. Yeah. So this is Pluto in the 11th house. So Pluto in the 12th house, this is a placement where, let's just begin with the positive ones here, because there are a lot of things with Pluto in the 12th house that can go wrong, or that I've seen going wrong. The 12th house is the house of isolation, is where things go to die. It's the last house, right? It's a Pisces house. It's the house of prison, the house of hospitals, a spiritual house, a Neptunian house, an elusive house. So when we have Pluto here, the good side here is that it may indicate someone that has a natural affinity to go very deep into things, that you have the ability to, similar like to the 8th house, but without the power, struggle issues that the 8th house comes with, that you have this ability to become a psychoanalyst somehow, that you really love to dig deep into the psyche of people. However, what I've seen playing out in real life, though, is many times, is that we end up attracting a lot of those basket cases, like a lot of people that we somehow take on social work. Let's just put it like that, like it is the classical placement for someone that wants to do social work. If you, want to help people that are dealing with addiction, because we're talking about Pluto here, so this could be someone that has like somehow of a social that you like to help people, in that regard. Again, I've seen cases where people ended up attracting a lot of those like partners that actually needed their help. So we may attract people that are a little bit complex because of the nature of their 12th house. And, death is a big theme here, I have to say. A big theme, because Pluto in itself represents death and transformation, and the 12th house is the last house. So it's like we are really obsessed in a way that there's a quality to us that we like to hide ourselves at times from the outside world, that we love to be in isolation, because the 12th house is the house of isolation. And I've seen many times that people love to spend their time alone at home, pondering, thinking about things, or even negatively again, that we ourselves are addicts. I've seen this case as well. Either we attract a lot of addicts in our life and we take on the role of helping them, the 6th house, becoming like, this, because it's the Pisces and Virgo axis here that we have, and the polarity point is the 6th house. So that we help them in their health, but also our own health could be at risk sometimes of the Pluto in the 12th house if we don't take proper care. I knew someone, that was a heavily karmic relationship that I had when I was very, very, very young. I was even too young for this relationship, I would argue, looking back, when I was 19, I had a relationship with a young man that he died as a result of his addiction, but he didn't die because of the addiction. He died because of an accident that he had because of his addictions. And he had that placement. He had Pluto in the 12th house, and that guy would spend a lot of time in his home, and he really was always in his own world. It was really unbelievable. And looking back now that I know astrology so well, it really made everything about him makes a lot of sense to me. So again, we may be prone to people. We may attract people that are, again, that are addicts, that are like have tendencies to, to hurt themselves. Even I know from another case from a woman that I know that she has Pluto in the 12th house, and she attracted a lot of partners that had, but she also had Neptune in the 12th house, if I'm not mistaken, that had a lot of addiction issues, and the one even killed himself, and then she had to clean it up. And oh my God, it was like a very dark story. So I'm sorry if I disturb you with that, but this is the 12th house is a very complex house. You need to understand that. So if you say that's not you, if you say, okay, what is she talking about here? Now, when we talk about the more, let's just say, mundane stuff when it comes to the 12th house, even though there's not such a thing like mundane stuff to the 12th house, but in order to make this more light, okay, it may also show someone that, again, works in those fields like hospitals, prisons, even, what's the word I'm looking for? A mortician, that was the word I was looking for. It is also a placement of being oftentimes a mortician. And again, the death in itself, a little bit like with Pluto in the 8th house, but with Pluto in the 12th house, it's a little bit more scary, I have to say. It's a little bit more otherworldly, where we really have a really good sense of the other world, what is going on, and we have to be careful not to be influenced by energies that we cannot see. This is a biggie with this one. I think ultimately this was something also that really added to the death of my ex-boyfriend back then. There's something also very quite schizophrenic about the Pluto in the 12th house, I have to say. Sometimes we can see schizophrenic tendencies with the Pluto in the 12th house. And again, the polarity point here is the 6th house. The 6th house is the house of health. And this is why I'm saying that, being sane, 6th house. So for you, it is very important that you have a very good diet, a very, very good, healthy way of living to be sane. That is very important to you, for you. So another thing, of course, is with the 12th and 6th house axis is the house of enemy. Okay, and big time when we have Pluto here, because Pluto represents power struggles. So you have to watch out to at times not to become your own worst enemy. And this ties again in with that story that I have with my ex-boyfriend, who had the Pluto in the 12th house. He was ultimately his worst enemy. So, watch out for any destructive behaviors that you have. Work on them. If you can channel them in a good way, being interested in psychotherapy, in also creativity, also everything that is also otherworldly, music also, even though the creativity part is more the 5th house, but also the 12th house can be a very creative place, because we draw in a lot of, inspiration from other worlds, from unseen worlds. So it can be a good thing. It can be a very good placement for Pluto to be in if we know on how to handle this energy. And again, it really depends on what you have in your chart. If that Pluto makes an aspect or not. If there are other planets. If there is a stellium going on in the 12th house. But again, so your evolutional point is the 6th house here. So again, you want to be healthy, sane. These are things that are going to help you ultimately, to get back on track and to purify your soul. So that is what I have for you guys. And take care and goodbye. Love you all. Bye.